I am here with Michael Minter, who is the global head of DC marketing. And DC is a division of Boardriders and Quicksilver. So, Michael, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and also about the company?
Well, DC was founded in 1994, and most people don't know about the brand. They think of the brand, they think of puffy skate shoes, they think of perhaps the MTV era when DC just dominated. But this DC is an interesting brand in that it really was the first brand, and this credit goes to the founders, Ken and Damon, to really innovate and create what we now know as collaboration culture and doing things that were outside. At the time, skateboarding was this tiny little industry, and to do really interesting things with artists and other brands and things that now are normal. DC was really the leader of that. So it's a privilege to be part of a sort of a fresh chapter for such a great brand.
Cool. And I know you've been in the surf and skate and shoe business for a long time. So tell us a little bit about your career path that led you to DC.
Well, my path's sort of unusual. I've been a creative my whole life. I grew up overseas, and I always was attracted to this industry. And but my early career started out just more on the branding side. I was doing identity systems for shopping centers, and I did a lot of work for Pfizer Pharmaceuticals and things like that. And I hated it. I hated it so much. And I, by pure chance, met a guy named Jeff Kelly, brilliant guy, the founder of a brand called Sanuk. And I took like a 50% pay cut to go work with Jeff. And because it gave me the opportunity to touch a brand holistically, from designing the shoes to photographing the shoes, to creating the campaigns for the shoes, to standing on the factory floor and developing the shoes, so to speak, and just understanding the whole widget. And it has helped me tremendously in my career. So smartest move I ever made.
That's awesome. I think I saw that you went to graduate school at SCAD. Is that right?
Yeah, I didn't finish up at SCAD, but I went there for a couple years with my brother and had a great time.
Cool. All right. Well, so you have at least a little Georgia in your background here. We're here in Atlanta.
Are you in Georgia?
We are. We're in Atlanta, Georgia. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, I love Savannah. I'm from the Washington, D.C. area originally.
Okay. And you're in Huntington Beach now, and you've been there for a good long while, though, right?
Well, I've lived in Southern California now for going on 20 years here soon enough, with a brief stint in Portland. But specifically at DC, I've been here about 3.5 years now.
Awesome. So just tell us a little bit about marketing at DC and what that looks like. What does the organization look like, and what is your focus there?
Well, so my focus was to help get this brand sort of back on track, both strategically and then in terms of cultural relevance. The brand, for a variety of reasons, had sort of lost its way. The founder refers to the past 10 years as sort of the dark decade, or the lost decade, I think he calls it. And it's, this is natural for brands, that when they're driven to make decisions strictly about top line growth, and then they find themselves sort of forgetting who they were and why they mattered at one point. And so my job is sort of to do the anthropology needed to get the brand aligned around a North Star. Like, what are we about? Where are we going? How can that be modernized for current reality, both on a brand level, on a business level? And so alongside my partner in crime on the product side, we've really built out a multi-year strategy to get the brand sort of back to relevance, is maybe a good way to put it. And so my job specifically is on the marketing side. And so I have, over the past 3 years, really built a team to be the creative drivers of all the content we're creating, all the campaigns, everything that way. And so far, so good.
Awesome. So what advice would you give either yourself early in your career or maybe a younger person that's starting out in their marketing career? What advice would you give them?
Oh boy. You know what I would say is play to your strengths. I had a boss early. I had a boss. I don't know, a few years back in my career that had the exact opposite conviction. It was just figure out your weaknesses and figure out how to turn them into strengths. Or as most HR departments would call your area of opportunity, right? And I just couldn't disagree more. I think figure out your strengths and triple down.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't mean don't work on something if you have an opportunity to improve. But what I try to do with my team and with myself is figure out what everyone's sort of special skills are, where they're passionate, and how do you leverage that?
Mm-hmm.
There's no reason to turn a center into a point guard if you don't have to.
Yeah, it's a great analogy. So that brings me to, what is your superpower? So what is the thing that you've tripled down on, knowing that you've got a great strength somewhere?
Well, I'm a bit unusual in my current role to the extent that I'm a creative at heart and by natural skill set. I happen to be in the senior role in a marketing capacity, but I actually feel like that's my unique strength is applying creativity to everything we're doing, and
That's awesome.
and figuring out how to make it serve the strategy. But I think ultimately I'm just curious. I just like to figure things out.
I love that. Curiosity is one of our core values at Setup, and I think
Good value.
it is. It's important. I mean, I always say that curiosity and tenacity go a long way. Both of those things.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So you've been there at DC Shoes for about 3.5 years, and I mean, we're in the midst of hopefully seeing the light at the end of the tunnel of a global pandemic where vaccines are being distributed. Other than the pandemic, though, what has been one of the biggest challenges that you've faced as a marketer last couple of years?
Well, those are, it's funny. I think about, pandemic or not, the pandemic put, I think, into overdrive something that is just an obstacle. And that is sort of a race to the bottom tactically. So when we look at, particularly around the area of like paid digital, directive product marketing, that sort of thing, when you're putting $1 into that slot machine and it's giving you $5 back, it is really difficult to not make that an addiction and to let it control all your marketing, all your decisions, all your budgets. And I worry that not just me personally, but our industry and as creatives, there's sort of an atrophy to thinking sort of like tactically innovating and thinking about how to create gravity for your brand, because it just gets so easy to just go, $1 in, $3 out. And that also, I think maybe the second obstacle would be just the homogenization I see go along with that. Is like, I miss the days when you wanted your spread ad in a magazine to just be disruptive and stand out against every other ad. And it's trickier to do that when, whether it's the culture at large is forcing a certain type of homogenization, just in messaging of what's the right thing to say, so to speak. And then in terms of like, social media and the ways we disrupt people to purchase, it just, it gets a bit mind numbing sometimes, but that's, I'm sure we'll figure our way out of this.
Yeah. So where do you find inspiration, either inside the quote walls of DC Shoes or outside of the walls?
Well, it's interesting because I grew up without boring you. I grew up in a remote jungle tribe in Papua New Guinea. And
wow.
And so, I never got, what's that?
That's different. Wow.
Yeah, I bathed in a river until I was 16 years old.
Wow.
and my parents were tribal missionaries actually. But I never got to grow up in a specific subculture that way. I wasn't punk rock. I didn't grow up as a skateboarder. I didn't grow up, I wasn't. And so in some ways it's always been this thing I've been self-conscious of, but in other ways it's been an advantage for me to be sort of always the objective anthropologist or outsider. And so when you ask me what inspires me right now, I've worked with a lot of different groups in my career, which I love, but skateboarding is very interesting and unique. It's arguably the last true subculture in this world. The sense of like protection of its culture, the camaraderie that these guys have to keep it special and meaningful is really cool. You just don't see it anymore. And so for me, that's super inspiring.
So it sounds like at your core, maybe your superpower is more being a cultural anthropologist.
There you go.
I mean, observing
by necessity.
Yeah, I mean, that's cool. That's really cool. So in terms of leadership, what are the values that are you mentioned curiosity, but what are the other values that are, important to you as a leader, and maybe values that you look for in teammates?
Well, one is that comes to mind is vulnerability. So like I always have a policy with every team I ever manage or lead, and that is you don't get to shit on someone else's idea unless you're willing to be vulnerable with one of your own, right? It's real easy. It is real easy to find out what's wrong with someone else's idea or create, some creative they're putting on the wall or idea for a campaign. And it's so easy to become self-conscious with that. And I think the vulnerability is that's where the magic is. And so if you kill that if your team dynamics inhibit that, you've got a problem, because you've got to create a culture where, I mean, it's cliche to say any idea is a good idea. No, there's bad ideas.
You're right.
But you've got to be willing to put them out there. And I mean, I can't think of a single thing I've done in my career that I'm proud of that at least 10 people told me sucked when I suggested it. And I think that's something to preserve.
I think any good creative understands that, failure is a path towards success, not an end.
Right.
Yeah, totally. One of my favorite quotes I have on the wall here is a Teddy Roosevelt quote about the man in the arena.
Oh, totally. It's a great one.
And it's, to me, it's the ultimate entrepreneur's quote, because it's easy to tell somebody how they should run their company if you're not running a company or whatever. But it's the doers that get the credit, not the critics. That's really the point of the quote, is the critics don't count. It's the doers.
Yeah. There's no shortage of critics.
There's plenty of critics. So in terms of mentorship and coaching, how do you coach and mentor younger members of the team or people that are working with you?
I guess it tends to be such an individual thing, of trying to put myself in the shoes of where they're at. But maybe the common thread there is for people that have a specific discipline or responsibility, the whole world is that thing to them, right? So if I'm having a one-on-one meeting, everything in their world is about that. And what I find helpful is to get them to sort of role play into like that they're the CEO. Like if you can really think about where your piece fits into the bigger picture, it takes on a whole different context. And so whether you're the manager of our skateboarding team, or whether you're a graphic designer or a copywriter or any other person on the team, really thinking about that bigger picture and what we're trying to do is, I think, super helpful.
That's great. And what I think you're saying is also you're helping build ownership so that they really are invested, not just in their little project, but how it fits in the larger piece.
Right.
Yeah. So as you know, setup we're marketing matchmakers. And a lot of times that means we connect brands and marketing agencies together. So we're always, we sort of live in the space between brands and agencies.
Right.
And so I'm curious, what your experience is working with marketing agencies, how you work with marketing agencies. Are there some things that you would always keep in-house in DC and never, ever outsource? And then are there other things that you might lean on agency support to get help?
Well, I don't have a patent answer to that as like an across the board thing in my career, but it's relative really to where I'm at and what we're trying to do. So my answer, say, to that question at Keene, previous stop in my career, would be different than at DC.
Mm-hmm.
So specifically to DC, like I said, because skateboarding is the heart of our brand. It's not necessarily where we get our growth and our the biggest business opportunity, but it's certainly the heart of the brand. And because it's such a nuanced and just difficult subculture to honor and to leverage, the likelihood of an external agency getting it right is just tremendously hard. And so for DC, to outsource something like that would be really risky. But then there's other things, sort of next ring out opportunities that definitely, I mean, we have a fantastic PR partner, for example, out of Australia that I use for our entire global business. And but in their case, if I was to speak highly of them, it's just about really getting it. It's really about having shared incentives about where we want the brand to go for both what I'm trying to accomplish, and I need to be conscious of what they're trying to do as an agency, because if I can be aware of the type of things they want to do to put points on their board, then and if that actually matters to me, which sounds counterintuitive, I'm going to get better work out of them. Yeah. And so I try to figure that out anytime I'm working with an agency.
Yeah, it seems like it'd be hard for you to find a lot of category expertise, but
right.
You could maybe find discipline expertise, like
definitely
somebody that's really good at email marketing or really
100%.
good at content creation or really good at some discipline piece versus trying to get somebody that really understands the nuance of skateboard culture, for example.
Exactly right. We do, so to that point, because we are in a multi-branded environment, there are also some things that way that I sort of have to call on the shared service provider.
Yeah.
And so that can be both a great thing and a limiting thing.
Yeah, I'll bet. So in terms of marketing as a discipline within DC Shoes, how do you show the value of marketing to those that are not marketers by trade and don't really necessarily always understand marketing?
Oh boy, that's that's always the challenge, right?
Yeah.
No, but I think if we make when we do things that are just really noticeable and turn the dial, it kind of speaks for itself. But we do I think a pretty good job of internal marketing, right? Of just constantly putting the progress in front of people. And whether it's a company-wide email, whether it's through town hall style meetings, just constantly showcasing the progress. The good news with marketing is people are always eager to see what you got cooking.
Yeah.
It's an innately sort of sexy, exciting arena.
Well, and speaking of that, is there a particular campaign or program or something that you did that you're either super proud of because it went really well, or even something that was a colossal failure that you learned something, valuable from?
Well, there's definitely stuff I'm proud of, and that it probably goes hand in hand with where I learned the most.
Yeah.
When I was, like, I think I mentioned to you off camera, I had the privilege of building a brand basically from nothing to something, a brand called Sanuk. I spent about a decade helping build that brand. And we had early on, and we had no resources. And so and we also wanted, we had some timelines that were problematic for us in terms of when we needed to ready our creative versus when the product was ready, just normal growing pains of a brand. And so we created a campaign we called Cut and Paste. So if we couldn't afford to have a surfer on a wave in Tahiti, well, we drew that wave. If we couldn't get the right shoe on, well, we cut it out of a magazine and placed it on. It was really a collage style aesthetic that we leveraged, but it was really about problem solving behind the scenes. And
Cool.
And so that was a lot of fun.
That's cool. I mean, and obviously it was cheap, but
Yeah.
it was creative, and it probably made for a nice, the output was effective, I'm sure.
What I learned though is that on one hand, it was this great innovation to solve like 10 problems we had.
Yeah.
And it was disruptive. I mean, it won awards. It was a great campaign for us, but it also opened up new pain points because it was so bespoke and so time intensive and so nuanced. And it was like, oh man, this is not something I'm going to be easily able to have our team in Japan replicate, or it's especially with humor-based things, it's very hard to scale and to export to partners in region and channel.
Yeah, that's where having probably an agency partner, if you could afford it, would have been great, because you
absolutely
say, here's the style, here's the concept, here's the here's how you use the comedic elements, and then scale this, make it work other places, and
right.
But you didn't have the resources to do that, I'm imagining.
Yeah, it's tricky. And at that point, it was sort of like my voice, right? So that was a lesson learned, is don't make it your voice.
Right. Well, I mean, even very early on in my company here at Setup, it began as, it was sort of the Joe Koufman company, and I never wanted it to be.
Right.
And so we've now scaled pretty well so that it's not just about me, it's about a team that does great work. So it's a good lesson. Okay, I've got a couple of fun questions for you that are random. So the first one is there a book or a movie or a quote or a band that inspires you?
Oh, so many.
Yeah, but you can pick a couple. You don't have to pick one.
I'll go with quote. Okay. My brother gave me a book years ago, and by a guy named Hugh Prather. I think I'm saying that correctly. It's called Notes to Myself. And he has a line in there where he says, the only sure rewards in life are in your actions, not from your actions. And I've tried to carry that with me in my career. It's like, man, if we're not having fun doing this, what is the point?
Yeah.
We chose this career for a reason. It's supposed to be fun, right? And finding the joy and the reward, and even the grueling, midnight edits on something is where you gotta find the smile.
Yeah. I think hardcore mountain climbers are often disappointed when they get to the peak.
Totally.
It's like, guess what?
Yeah.
The fun was in the climbing, not just standing on the peak.
100%. Easy to lose sight of.
Cool. All right. Is there a band or a movie or a book or something else that you want to highlight too, or no?
That inspires me? Or
yeah.
Oh man, so much. Lately there's I guess you call him, and I've always been one of these people, when I'm asked about my musical taste, I say anything but country, but I've fallen in love with Sturgill Simpson. And I don't know if you know Sturgill's music.
Yeah.
But I just love anytime someone finds a new way to like shatter genre, or to just take something that you feel like all the ideas have been sucked out of and bring fresh blood to it. And that's just cool. If you can, that is cool. Boy, you can do anything.
Nice. I've been getting into Beirut, the band, quite a bit lately.
There you go.
So, yeah, you got to check them out if you haven't. Although I had tickets to see them play here in Atlanta, and he canceled the tour because he had some horrible thing go wrong with his voice. And
right.
I hope he's
I
okay.
assume because of COVID. Oh.
No, it was way before that. This was like 2019. But Zach Condon, if you're out there, man, I hope your voice is okay. We want to hear you sing and play again.
There you go. Now you're
Okay.
getting more tickets too.
Yeah, so exactly. Yeah, exactly. So what's a brand that you've never worked on that you admire, and why do you admire it?
That's a great question. But I think the brand that I'm so often impressed by, and I'm curious what their situation is right now. Maybe they're gone. I don't know. But is Cirque du Soleil. And here's why. It's one thing, it's hard enough to get an organization, product team, marketing team, sales teams aligned around who your brand is. How does it live and breathe? What does it smell like? What kind of beer does it drink? Does it drink beer? Does it, all these things that to help figure out what your brand is about and to get everyone on the same page, the same personality, that is a chore in itself, right? But if you can not only do that, but absorb other iconic brands into it. So how does Cirque du Soleil do the Beatles? How does Cirque du Soleil do Michael Jackson? The fact that you can see these other distinct brand concepts honored while still being very Cirque du Soleil is so impressive to me. Like that is, to me, that's just such a creative, like just magic trick.
That's awesome. By the way, Cirque du Soleil drinks port. They don't drink beer.
Yeah.
Port.
Yeah, there you go.
Just FYI, it's port. Fine. It's like Amontillado. It's good. It's good. European port. Okay, I got two more quick ones for you. One is, what's a fictional realm or story in which you would like to have lived or live?
Can I have two?
Yeah.
They're total opposites. The first would be the Jetsons, right?
Oh,
so
awesome.
I mean, come on, you push a button, all the dishes are done. I think we've all been wanting the Jetsons world.
Our flying car, they had the flying cars, which I'm still waiting for.
Yeah, it was great. But the opposite to that was just, to me is the dream state is like Swiss Family Robinson, that your houses are all interconnected into trees, and that sounds awesome to me.
I thought you were going to say the opposite of the Jetsons would have to have been the Flintstones, right?
Yeah, well, Swiss Family Robinson seems close, doesn't it?
True, and they did have some crossovers, Jetsons and Flintstones together, which makes no sense. So, okay, last question is just, where do you find joy outside of work? Do you have a hobby or what provides you great joy outside of the office?
Well, a few years ago, I would have said painting. I love studio art, but I've got two daughters and they keep me busy. So that's really where my joy and fun comes from. So
you got to paint with your daughters.
Yeah, totally. But I've probably traded painting for, cocktail creation. Right. Sadly.
Right. Awesome. Well, Michael Minter from DC Shoes, I really appreciate the time together. Anything else you want to add?
No, this was great. Thanks for the conversation.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you.
Take care.